Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the news behind the news with Rav Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And I hope that all is well. This afternoon, I'm glad to have the person who's in front of me, which is Miss Melanie Meijer zu Scholtern. Good afternoon to you, and thanks for being on the program.
That was a very good pronouncement.
Yeah? Okay, good. Yeah, because I literally practiced saying your name. I believe in saying people's full name, even, if it has many syllables and stuff, because, everyone's name means something,
Yeah, everyone is struggling with my name, even myself.
That's no problem. So Melanie is the, I guess I would say, director, of the manager of the Nature Foundation of St. Martin. And as we know, nature and the environment is very important. It is really kind of also, in a sense, the backbone of our tourism product, because while we sell hospitality, good service, our smiles, our food, etc., we also sell the beauty of our island. Exactly. And for many years, when you look at old pictures of St. Martin compared to today, whether it's the lagoon, the pond, certain districts, you're like, my goodness, maybe we've changed enough, and let's preserve what we have, not just for the sake of tourists, but for our own selves. But before we get into all of that discussion about the Nature Foundation and so forth, could you tell us about yourself and, what inspired you to get into the environmental protection field?
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in the Netherlands, and there, after my high school, I just was very interested in biology. So I basically went to study biology on the Free University in the Netherlands. And after that, during my master's, which was more concentrated in ecology, which is like a more specific thing in biology, I got to do an internship on St. Eustatius, and that's how I came to the Caribbean. So I actually never really worked in the Netherlands, only here in the Caribbean. And after St. Eustatius, I also temporarily worked on Ceiba, and that's how I came on St. Martin, because of course those islands are all connected.
Correct.
They're different, very different, but the nature and the marine life looks very similar. So there we got some similarities, and that's how I came to St. Martin in 2015 and started with the Nature Foundation. First as a project and research on the lead of Tazio, and then unfortunately he departed, I think, already more than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I became the manager of the Nature Foundation.
Okay, since then. Okay. I'm curious, what stands out to you where St. Martin's concerned?
What stands out? Well, St. Martin, first of all, is a very beautiful island. You hear a lot of tourists, if you ask them, why do you come to St. Martin? It's like, it's so green, it's mountains. And that's what I really like about St. Martin as well. You have so many things on the island. You have beautiful waters, you have beautiful dive sites. I don't know, I know a lot of people don't dive on this island, like scuba diving, I mean. But there are really diversity of sites, which wrecks you can dive on, but also beautiful reefs. You can see a lot of marine life. And then on land, you also actually still have hiking trails on land, which are beautiful to hike on. And because it's the tourists who are coming to the island, most of them are not so concentrated on the environment or on nature, and that actually gives you a lot of peace when you are there, because you're like the only ones. And then of course the island also have the busyness, the activities, nice restaurants. So I think it's a lot of advantages on this island. You have a lot on a small piece.
Yeah, I gotcha. So you can pick and choose what.
Yeah, exactly.
What suits your groove, basically.
Correct.
Okay, cool. So being a manager now of the Nature Foundation, I guess my first question to you would be, what were your focus coming in, and what have been some of the main work that you've been doing?
Yeah, that's a good question, because the focus is always difficult by the Nature Foundation, because we have quite some responsibilities which are broad, you know. There's a lot of nature on St. Martin, a lot of things which need attention and environmental input, but we only are a small foundation. I mean, we have 3 core staff, so it's very small and little what you could do. So sometimes it feels like we are a bit running around, behind the facts, instead of really trying to put in potential policies or plans which works on the long term. We are trying to save the fire a little bit there, or
Gotcha.
So that is a difficulty, but what I really tried at the Nature Foundation is putting more structure to have clearly what are we going to work on. We improved a lot of the relationships also with the government to make it more clear what they expect from us, because we still depend on funding as well. I mean, we cannot do all our activities for free, so we still need to have projects and the government on our side to do the right things. And I'm very for working together to reach there, because we need their support to make our island more environmental friendly as well. We cannot do that, just one little foundation cannot do that.
Correct.
Yeah, we need everyone in the community. So that is a focus point. Education as well, we have been focusing on a lot, going to the schools, but also having events which are more interactive. For example, the last 2 years we have events where students could come and snorkel with us. So they can actually, see what is down there in the marine life, because a lot of locals have maybe never been able to see the corals on the water, for example, because most of the time you do need to go with a boat, for example, and that is more expensive, So education, I think, is very important to prepare for the future, because without education, people don't know what to do and why it's important to protect the environment.
Gotcha. Now, you said something which is so important, because it is a challenge that many foundations face where it relates to funding.
Exactly.
You do receive subsidy. What other avenues do you guys also get that financial assistance? Have you received grants recently, or in the process of receiving grants and so forth?
Yeah, so first of all, we have a management agreement with the government, with the Farming Ministry, where we do certain tasks for them. They cannot do, especially field tasks. Yeah, so we kind of a little bit a field station for them. And we give them advice related to especially construction close to the waterfront, or if we see incidents which could be a concern for the environment, we report that. So we have there some things we have to do for our, you can call it subsidy, but it's more a management agreement.
Okay. And so also considering that you have a core staff of 3 persons, how robust is the volunteerism that, contributes to foundation?
Yeah.
Would you say you're satisfied, with the amount of people who would come in and help out?
Yeah, we do have volunteers, but we actually, what is helpful for us is interns, or a student who does an internship. So they, for example, studying biology, or they studying something with environment, and they need to gain experience and at the same time research something. So those mostly stay for 5 months. We have at least normally 1 student at a time, mostly from abroad, but also locals who study abroad. And they can have a lot of input, because they're really with the foundation for 5 months, so they get to experience everything, and they really learn, and are very useful. Because volunteers, yes, for events we have volunteers, but really for daily management is almost impossible, because people are not able to commit that much time, or either don't have the background which is needed.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sometimes we have scuba divers who volunteer, and that could be very useful. Definitely.
Yeah, because then they have that experience.
It's mostly, if it's a diving volunteer, it should be someone who has during the week time and already has a high education also in scuba diving, because we are not down there just to enjoy.
Yeah.
Of course, we enjoy it as well. But we are down there to do work, and that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're installing a dive mooring, where the dive mooring is basically where the boats go on, so they don't have to drop anchor, because you cannot drop an anchor on reef. So to install those mooring or repair them, that is underwater work as commercial diving. So people need to be experienced.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's not just for pleasure.
Yeah, gotcha. So I'm curious as well as to what goes into the day-to-day, of field work. What does that consist of usually?
The field work can be different. Of course, we quite a lot on the water. So at least 3 times per week, we're on the water with our boat. It's a yellow boat. It's called Yellowtail Marine Park Patrol. We do patrols for the marine park. We manage the marine park. Check who is there. Check if all the moorings are there. do things on the reef. We have some projects on the water, like coral outplants. We have a nursery on the water. We do surveys of the reef. Then we do also surveys for government, as I mentioned before. Of course, I still have to answer your question about the funding all, because there's much more what we talked about before. So we do on the water, for example, check what is there, especially if it's close to where they want to build a marina. We look at the species down there, because there are species which are invasive, but there are also species which are very important or endangered. And that is a difference if you're going to build something, especially at the waterfront. If it has an impact on corals or native seagrass beds, that could be destructing the island. But if it's more clear down there, or there is an invasive species, then there is not such a big impact if you want to build something. And on land, we do something similar. We do sea turtle patrols, especially for nests. So every year, sea turtles come ashore, which is endangered and a protected species on St. Martin. They come ashore and they nest, and we monitor those nests. And in case there is one, we try to mark it and protect the nest, which is sometimes a challenge, because of course we have also tourism and beach driving could really negatively affect those sea turtle nests. Waves, so like last year we had a lot of wave action, search, and that can cause a nest to flush away. We respond to incidents, for example, injured birds, especially pelicans. We have unfortunately quite a lot lately, which is not a good news, because also the pelican is a protected species. Yeah. And it's of course our national bird.
Yes, correct.
So it's not going so well with that bird as well. Anything with protected species. Invasive species could be also something we are reacting to, but it's a difficult subject, because, for example, the monkey is an invasive species on St. Martin, because it has a negative impact and it doesn't belong here. But yeah, the problem is that it's so big right now that we can do enough, to do something about it. But raccoons, there are a few raccoons on the island we know of. That is something we really try to catch if
reported.
Yeah. Yeah, also because they're not always doing so well. Lately we caught one which was really sick, and that could be, of course,
sick due to injury or
disease.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, and also incidents like oil spill, we're trying to react to, at least to take from our part the environmental impact, and have extra support, for example, the Coast Guard or from the inspection, to see if they can do something with the situation. Eventually, we cannot enforce. We don't have no what is called BOA, like special police powers, but we do collect the information to help
you report
the law enforcement.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, and you say you wanted to share a bit more on the funding?
Oh, yeah, your question about the funding, because we didn't even got to that yet. So indeed, we have the government funding, but also a very big part comes due to project or research. So we have scientists from other countries who want to do research here. We help them. So we provide that they have the authorization to do the research. We provide and help them, the boat, like we lend out our boat, we help them with the research. But we also have projects. So right now we have, for example, which is like a grant, but only to be used specifically. So right now we have the Innoplastic project, which is an EU-funded project. Yeah. And thereby we work on plastic removal from beaches and monitoring, and also education. So therefore we can hire a special person who works on that project. So therefore we can expand a little bit. Yeah. But of course that person needs to mostly concentrate on the subject of the project.
Of the funding,
and do what the projects ask for. But it's a great help. For example, due to that, we were able to get a pickup truck from that project. Of course, it needs to be used for the project, but it gives extra, support to the foundation. And yeah, it's a great help as well. It's not all projects are useful, but we try to really have a subject which is very helpful, because in the world or in our part of the world, there are quite some calls where you can apply for, but applying for a project costs also a lot of time and it's a lot of effort. But this one worked out very well. And we do also smaller projects. Like we have the AUC always, the medical school, who helps us with some education projects, smaller projects like the Junior Rangers. We're going to do that this year again. So yeah, for all the younger students listening, follow our Facebook page because definitely there will be some things this year for you to do.
I think one thing that's great, is indeed you guys really involve the community in it. Because as much as possible, we need that widespread knowledge and understanding of the importance of being involved in protecting our environment, knowing the ecosystem and why different species have its place or don't have its place in that as well. Yeah. So for example, you just shared that with the plastics project, you were able to get a truck. One of the things I'm curious about is how is it for you guys in terms of getting resources, assets as well, like your boats or boats, different maybe ATVs even, given maybe certain terrains that you have to go to. Have you do you guys already have that in house, or are you trying to also gain those extra?
Exactly. Yeah, that is always something which is hard to cover, right? Or the overhead's the same. Overheads like office costs and stuff and electricity is always hard to cover because when you have more people are doing more for a project, you have also more costs. So not all projects cover that. So there are some challenges there, but we do try to find the right projects where a truck, for example, is very much needed. Like for the Inoplastic, we need to go along a lot, and we have to remove a lot of trash from the beaches, for example, and it just cannot be done without an extra vehicle. So we have a very good reason, but not all projects have that kind of funds available either. So you have to look the right things. But we also have DCNA, you may have heard of, Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance. That's where Tatio works right now. And it's an umbrella organization for the park organization in the Dutch Caribbean. So it supports, it helps with finances and does projects which all parks could execute and thereby support all those parks, and also offer us like financial support, for example. And in the past, they have set up a trust fund, and their fund each year we also get something, just like Curaçao and Statia, Bonaire, Aruba, and Saba get. It's of course not a big thing, but it helps a little bit to, for example, repair our boat. Like in 2020, we were able, because of that, to repair our boat because it was doing quite bad. And the boat is expensive, I think everyone knows. We had the boat already since 1997, but it really needed a big upgrade. And yeah, so those things is challenging every year.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to get the finances up and to get everything running at the foundation is challenging.
Gotcha. Okay, so with that, we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav. And this afternoon, I'm speaking to the manager of the Nature Foundation, Miss Melanie Meijer zu Scholtern. So, as we last spoke about resources for the foundation, I'm curious about as well, how do you go about then? I'm pretty sure partnerships also help you, in being able to achieve your work. So, what has that been like in terms of networking and making partnerships with other foundations or even businesses to be able to achieve your goals?
Yes, those are important as well. And if we look to environmental protection and nature conservation, that's a lot of regional partnerships. So especially information. I mean, there's not so much information about nature on St. Martin. So, and how to respond to certain things. So we have regionally quite some contacts or workshops or trainings we do together. There are organizations in the Caribbean region or in the Netherlands who want certain things to improve on the island. So they do offer training, support, workshops, meetings. So that is happening actually quite often. In 2 weeks, I, for example, go with Birds Caribbean to learn more about bird monitoring, which will be very important for our island, because St. Martin is like a hotspot for birds. We may not always see that, but it is a very important migrational route as well. We locally, EPIC, we have the other foundation we sometimes work with. We work with NIPB. I don't want to insult anyone because I forget anyone. But locally there are of course not that many environmental organizations. But we have definitely worked with a lot partners. Also with like SXM Action to clean up beaches. We have worked with the Red Cross. We have done a project in the past together. So there are quite some things. And we also had businesses who support us. Some businesses do donations. Like this year and last year we had SXM Nectar, St. Martin Nectar, who if you buy one product, then you get half of it goes to a foundation on the island, and also Nature Foundation was part of that. I think for this year they're going to do a sunscreen, which is safe for the reef. So if you don't have your sunscreen yet, go to St. Martin Nectar and support the foundation on St. Martin as well when you purchase one. So that is, for example, partnerships we have more often, and every year or month there could be something different. And there are quite some businesses who actually themselves reach out to us. So that is really great to see that involvement. For example, Port de Plaisance also in the past had give us funds to help one employee, to increase the education on the island. Some businesses do some fundraising for us. Yeah.
Okay.
So our little bits help.
Gotcha. Okay. That definitely is understood. So I know one of the things that you do is the water quality testing. How often do you do that, and is that info of the test results available online as well?
Yeah, the water quality is always a difficult issue because, first of all, we don't have a lab ourselves. So we need to collaborate, for example, with SLS Lab. They have an environmental lab where I can test the water quality. And also the AUC have supported us with some research. Unfortunately, not everything can be published as yet, like the exact results, because we're also still working on something for this year. And why it cannot everything be published? Because when something is could also harm St. Martin in the tourist range. So we always need to be careful. We more have to use the results to try to change it than really try to harm the island and, for example, the tourism industry. So we always have to be careful. If we find something concerning, we try to first see if we can address it. But we don't really have the means to do anything large scale. It's more like, okay, if there's a situation at one pond, let's see, and maybe it's caused due to the bad water quality.
Okay.
And it's also, the water quality is just a very big problem because all around the island we have runoff water. We have septic tanks from people overflowing or from businesses which are running into the ponds, for example, and from the ponds it goes to the ocean. And hotels which have certain pipes, and not always their water quality or the water treatment station is working proper. So we can also not just point out one person or one business who is doing it, because it's just continuously going on. And it's also not by just publishing negative results that certainly it will change. So it's a big problem, and one of the solutions is trying to connect more and more houses and businesses to basically the sewery, so the wastewater pipes, which then will be guided to treatment plant, for example, on Illich Road, and get the second treatment plant in Simpson Bay and Cole Bay.
Gotcha.
Connected. I think that is the bigger solution, and that is something, of course, which money and the government needs to make available, and that's also not something we can just create in a month or something. That's taking years, unfortunately, but it can be concerning. And I think that it is important that everyone can realize that they can do something, about their wastewater at least. For example, make sure that your septic tank doesn't overflow. That's an important one, that at least your water ends up the right way, because that polluted water can cause birds to die, coral reefs to go down, and besides, it's not healthy for us either at all.
Correct. So, okay, I follow you. So, in a sense, is the polluted water, the bad water, polluted water is the result, but we should really tackle all the cogs that go into creating that result, basically.
Yeah, and it's a big problem. It's not something small we can just fix by one thing. We really have to work from it all together and hope that the sewage pipes are coming quicker, and that also controls are, for example, improved on businesses who do have their own wastewater treatment plant. That water, what they pump out, is clean.
Correct.
Boats as well, what do they pump out? It's really hard to point out someone at fault, because everyone is doing a little bit, basically.
Yeah. Adding to the pot. Yeah. I see. Now, even what you shared is really highlights one of St. Martin's main environmental struggles, which is either constant filling in or polluting of wetlands. And it definitely has been long-standing. So I'm curious about what additional steps can we take to protect and preserve our remaining wetlands?
Yeah, indeed, the wetlands are very important. It is also a sanctuary for birds, A lot of migratory birds come there or eat there. I think one of the main things is the water. Need to be clean. So those ponds often are a collection of wastewater running down the hills, So often polluted water does end up in those ponds. So addressing that issue and trying to find solutions to get that water run off the right way, that is a big step forward. But it's also important to keep the most important plants around, or trees around your ponds, which is mangroves. They are crucial for our health as well, because they filter the water. They help us again in floods and also in droughts, because they mitigate those stuff. So mangroves, it's important to keep them, not to cut them much. I mean, there are some trimming is possible, but you should not do more than, for example, 25% per year. And it also depends on the species. Mangrove should be something which actually I think should be a protected species on St. Martin. At least the red and the black mangroves, because they are just crucial for us. They are crucial for the wetlands, for the bird species. They also help us during storms.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because they protect the coast.
Yes, exactly.
And as I said, also mitigate the floodings.
So, were you guys also involved in the planting of the mangroves? I think that was a project that was done near a while back as well.
Yeah, what I'm aware of, that was before I joined the foundation. But when the causeway was built, there were some mangroves planted by the Nature Foundation. And then after the hurricane, Epic planted some mangroves in the lagoon and by Little Key. Okay. We helped them as well, but it was their project. We also planted some mangroves in Mullet Pond.
Okay.
But they had some challenges with the iguanas eating them. So the young mangroves, of course, are great for the future, but they also have challenges. So it's also important that we protect what we have. Yeah. And right now, the mangroves don't have no protected status.
And for that to happen, that would have to be agreed to by law?
Yeah, basically our law says now that species which are, for example, in the SPA protocol, Annex 1 and 2, are automatically protected species. And the SPA protocol is like a regional protecting of wildlife and species. And the mangroves are in Annex 3, which means they're at risk. But right now, by our law, they're not protected. But the law could be changed, or you could add species from Annex 3 as a protected species. But that needs to be like a ministerial decision, I think. Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Or a landsbesluit. I'm not sure the English word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
So then species could be added, and that's something we did address to the minister as well. So that's hopefully something what can be done in the future, to have some more species added, because what is a protected species on St. Martin? There are only a few. For example, we do not have protected plants. Of course, you cannot just cut a tree, because there is like civil work permit needed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to clear land and stuff. So there are permits needed, but the species itself is not protected under the nature ordinance.
I see.
Like how sea turtles and pelicans are, for example.
I see. And have you by any chance identified plants or trees that need to be protected by law?
Yeah, I think the Lignum vitea, everyone pronounces it different because it's a Latin name. But it's
Repeat that, what is it?
It's like a tree which grows slow, but it can withstand hurricanes, and the wood is very hard, so very strong.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a tree which would be good to protect. And of course, mangroves.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially the red and the black mangroves, because we all have 4 species we have. We also have the bottomwood and the white, but the red and the black, those are the most important one, which really stands in the water. And I think what is also important to get some level of protection for seagrasses. They're maybe in the water,
Mm-hmm.
but they also protect us from erosion, from storm surge. They help with those things, and they're a great habitat for a lot of fish species to grow up in as well. And sea turtles feed on it. They help with a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Seagrasses could also be something of interest to protect better.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad that you're teaching me a lot, honestly.
Things.
So, no, that's cool. That's cool. Our coral reefs as well, have deteriorated over the years.
Yeah.
Can you explain to listeners, the role coral reefs play in our ecosystem and what can be done to further revive them?
Sure. Yeah, coral reefs are very important for us because, first of all, it's a great biodiversity. What lives on coral reefs? There are fish species and lobsters we like to eat. So if we take away coral reefs, where do they live? And how are we still going to have reef fish to eat, for example, or lobsters? So therefore, they're a very important home, coral reefs. And then they also filter the water. They're a great tourist attraction because why people come to our island is exactly to see those coral reefs. Where do they dive? On coral reefs. If there's no coral, it's not going to be nice. If there's no coral, then we also have algae species, which basically will grow instead. And that can make the water very murky, which will turn our waters not in clarity anymore. There are also fish species like parrotfish, for example. They help to eat those algae. And they also create the sand for our beaches by eating from the coral reefs. Mostly the algae. So there is a very important as well. And they also protect us against storm. Like there are so many things coral reefs can do for us. Mm-hmm. Or are doing actually for us. Because especially when you have shallow reefs, if a storm hits and waves hit, they break first on the shallow reefs. And then they hit the land with less force. You can really see that nicely, I think, in Galion. On the French side is a good example. Or Orient Bay. And that helps to protect the coast, So, yeah, coral reefs is something we really need. We depend on because the people come here for our beaches. They come to snorkel. They come to dive. If that is not available, then they choose other islands, So we have a very competition there. There are a lot of beautiful islands in the Caribbean, and some may take better care of their coral reefs. Mm-hmm. So then tourists eventually in the future will choose to go to those other islands and not to St. Martin, and then our whole economy can crash. So there's a very high importance to them, and they haven't done well. I mean, worldwide, first of all coral reefs are going down due to climate change. Yeah, the higher temperatures basically stress out those corals. And they throw out like they have a symbiosis with like algae species. They throw it out, and then if that's too long, they die. We call it bleaching because they turn out white when they throw out their algae. Those corals, I think, also in St. Maarten, beside the worldwide problems, have been facing a lot of threats. So first of all, I see it myself. I've been diving here since 7 years, and you just see it down. There was a massive disease, stony coral tissueless disease it's called. Other islands are dealing with it as well, and it wiped out a lot of corals. Just like COVID for people, this disease is like a coral disease, and it's even more deadly than COVID, way more. And that caused a lot of corals to die, but hopefully the strong ones survive and, reproduce. But they also face problems with wastewater. So if a lot of wastewater contains a lot of nutrients, when these nutrients enter the water, that cause algae to bloom. Yeah, because that's how a lot of algae species like to grow. If there's a lot of nutrients, they start to grow. And that can grow over the corals. And besides, it affects the corals directly as well. So we have quite some problems. Then we have development around the shore, which can impact coral reefs, overfishing. I mean, St. Maarten, the fishing is not so big. We have only some, sport fishermen. So that's the good thing. But in the whole region and in the world, overfishing is happening. And eventually fish can swim up and down, So if our neighbors fish a lot, then it can still affect also our fishing stock. And if not many fish are on the coral reefs, that can cause the algae to grow more, because a lot of those fish eat those algae, and that again can smother and go over the coral reefs. So there's a lot of ecology and background information there, and it's a lot of with nature is that those connections, environmental connections, we don't even know all of them, but they all have influence on each other.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's one huge link, really.
Yeah,
exactly. You just can't afford to, pull different pieces out of that link.
Yeah, and if you pull out one link, it could have a very destructive end.
Down to the fact of
sometimes
impacting
not,
our own
but
lives.
It could be.
Yes, correct. Even with that, a major concern for pollution, has been the lagoon. Because, due to waste, paints, garbage, and other pollutants, have contaminated the water. But I'm curious about the extent of its pollution and what are the preventative steps we can take to protect it from becoming more toxic.
Yeah, I think it again comes to wastewater. So a lot of houses around the lagoon, people don't do always on purpose either. I mean, if you have your septic tank there, it easier ends up in the lagoon than when you're on a hill or when you're further away, because it overflows, or flooding can cause the septic tank to overflow. There are businesses, of course, and hotels which may not have their water waste treatment plant working properly every time. So first of all, wastewater, sewage is a big problem, and that could impact the sediment of the lagoon. So that's probably built up over the years in the sediment, which can cause that sediment to be very unhealthy, basically. So when they start to dredge, that sediment is come up. So there is some problem. And toxins or products which are banned in other countries should also just be banned here. Especially if you're thinking about certain types of anti-fouling or toxic paint for boats and stuff. Yeah, that sometimes also just being done right on the waterfront, and it ends up in the water. So that's a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that, we're going to take our final break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. This is the news behind the news, and I'm joined with Melanie Meijer zu Scholtern, the manager of the Nature Foundation. So as we just recently spoke about the lagoon, another one of St. Maarten's major environmental concerns is definitely the dump, because it emits this very foul, worrisome stench, and I'm curious, about the extent of which Nature Foundation has worked with government on solutions to it, because at the same time, there's been so many different proposals over the years to try to figure out, what is the right approach, what is the step that we can take to, one, reduce it from continue to rise, so whether it's shipping it, turning it to energy, etc. But overall, the point being that we can truly reduce this, I think it's fair to say, poisonous amount in the center of our island.
Yeah, that's also one of our bigger environmental problems on the island, which is already continuing for so many years. And it's basically too big, for Nature Foundation, of course, to tackle or to change. What we could do is give advice, and also to the public, and also to the government. But eventually the government needs to have the right funds to tackle the problem, because it's also, of course, costly to change this. It's not something cheap. Otherwise, we would have done it already, I'm sure. So the biggest problem is that St. Martin just creates a lot of waste. There are some measurements from the past which are quite higher than surrounding islands, so that we basically create more waste per person. But of course, we also have a lot of tourists, and maybe there are illegal things happening with waste entering the island. I don't know. Sometimes people think so. So there's a lot of waste we create. And that we could reduce. Everyone could reduce their waste. And you could think about those single-use plastics you're using, this bag you get from the store, this styrofoam food container, the straws. We may have the ban in the future coming, or it went already through on bag straws and food containers, which will majorly help, because those plastics never biodegrade. And it contributes to the waste on our islands. So I think we should also think about more things like what can we not only reduce, but use products we can reuse. That's an important one. Thereby we could create less waste. And then, of course, what do we do with our waste? Yes, it's going to the dump, but some doesn't even make it to the dump because the way how it's being transported. Mm-hmm. Or how the bins are set up. Wind is taking the trash and it just ends up into the ocean. So there's a lot of steps we need to make.
On a hill, etc. Yeah.
There's a lot of steps. You know, we have to create the right way how garbage is being collected, all of us, and which should not be loose around outside the road. That should be in proper containers, closed. If people bring waste or personally bring waste to the dump, that should be in a covered truck, for example, so that it cannot blow off. And then when it arrives at the waste facility, I will call it, there are different ways. There should be recycling. There should be separation of trash. I know there are some trashes being indeed separated on the dump, but we can do much more at home as well. Yeah, we can put paper separate, cans separate, which is never really done on St. Martin. Now you just throw everything in the same bin. But in other countries, which are ahead of us, it's already for 40 years normal that all that trash is collected separately. Mm-hmm. And those people are paying for their trash being collected. We are not paying for it.
Yes.
So it's, of course, how it's being collected right now, I don't want to pay for it either, right? Because it's just not done properly. But if waste is being done, done the right way, collected the right way, treated the right way, we will have to pay for it. That's what we have to think about, because we cannot expect high-class treatment and get it for free.
Yeah.
Right? What can be done with our waste is, as we said, recycling. But recycling is only working for certain products. It's not working for plastics. So plastics, just not try to use them. Other things can be burned. Yeah, you can have a facility where you create energy, which the government has also thought about. And we could think about partnerships with other countries. Yeah. Gotcha. So there's quite a lot of steps.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it's just at a point where we need a solution. That we could decide on, and then just work towards taking those steps till we reach the solution.
But I think we definitely also, I mean, I don't like to pay for things either, but if we want those things to done properly, we have to think about that in the future. There should be a household collection fee.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But to just put it on the dump is not really fair to ask a collection fee.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But if it's being treated the right way, each household should basically have a little support there.
It's always a benefit. It's like paying for the road, teachers, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I'm curious about is that at the end of the day, we are one island on a whole. So do you guys have any relation with your counterpart on the friend side, and do you collaborate to address any environmental concerns that affect the whole island?
Yeah, we do collaborate with the French side, especially the Reserve Naturel. Unfortunately, not as much as we should. There are definitely better ways we could collaborate, but there are some challenges because they are basically EU or France, so they have different laws. They have to do it in a different way because they have the collectivité who takes the decisions. So we definitely do collaborate, but I think it could be improved. Sometimes we go to similar workshops, and there is always a good time, to catch up with the people from the Reserve Naturel, for example, and to see if we can do things together. Other things is difficult because they have another agenda than us. Not only because they want to have another agenda, but because they have financial support for different things, for example. So it's not always a conscious choice. We also depend on what kind of projects we could get or where we can get funding for. You cannot always choose that. So the priorities could differ as well, which therefore we cannot work together on one subject because they're not working on it, or the other way around right now. And we all have a lot of responsibilities also on the French side, so that sometimes leaves not much time to collaborate.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So even with that, what are some of the trainings that you and your team undergo?
We have trainings like what I mentioned about the birds. Mm-hmm. We have done in the past about reef monitoring, for example. We have exchanged, especially with Dutch Caribbean islands, often. For example, about marine park management, and installing moorings, trainings like those things. If we have a project, we always have special training for that. So there are quite some stuff go around, or symposiums we're going to. Like I had one last year about sharks, because we worked a lot on sharks in the Dutch Caribbean the last years, and that was really a great opportunity to see what the other islands and countries do as well. What else? I think it's mostly, especially certain subjects, what we're working on or to improve our monitoring on. Mm-hmm. Sea turtles is also something we have done in the past, or have like regional organization you have for that. And they each year give like a workshop meeting, so where you learn new things, but also learn about research on the other islands or what the other islands do. And that's just a great help to better improve our monitoring or our advice, for example.
You're constantly refreshing, basically.
You have to, because there are so many fields we are involved in, and you need to know from each a little bit at least.
Yes, indeed. Because finally, one thing I'm definitely curious about is the brown pelican monitoring that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Because to what extent has that population decreased, and how much of danger is it in that sense?
Yeah, so the pelicans is also something we do. We just started up the monitoring for this year. Unfortunately, 2020 we have no data, but we have from 2021 we have no data, and we have data from 2020 and 2019. And so far for this year, the numbers are much lower. So we're very concerned as well the nesting as the Also the adults. We have since 2019 like a island count on the Dutch side, we call it, and then quickly you go around and try to count as many pelicans. So those numbers are lower, which is concerning. We have to see the next months how the rest of the countings go. We have also a bird expert, well, it's more a hobby person, but who knows a lot about birds and also has been involved a lot with the Nature Foundation in the past as a board member. So he helps us as well with that. Because I cannot be an expert on sea turtles, sharks, and birds and corals. You know, you need help. So there, we will see what happens the next months, and we definitely will report on our concerns. But I don't think it's going so well, to be honest. We also had a lot of injured pelicans, like this year already 2, and it's only January. We had another 7 last year, and most of them died. Wow. So they had something similar symptoms, some kind of paralysis symptoms, which could be to do with botulism, which is a disease in birds, mostly due to bacteria which can grow in like contaminated soil or waters. So maybe that's an option. That's why those birds get sick. But it's not clear. I mean, we have, of course, worked in the past with vets, but it's very difficult for them to say as well what is the cause why the bird is sick. And mostly it leads to death, unfortunately.
That's definitely unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's really sad because it's our national bird, and also their living habitat gets smaller. They nest on Fort Amsterdam mostly, and they're a lot around the fresh pond.
I've seen a bit around the natural pool area as well.
Yeah, there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it could also, of course, that they shift around or go to the front side.
Yeah.
That's possible too.
Yeah, because, you don't see them as often. Anyway.
Yeah.
I remember seeing them pretty often as I grew up in town. So, like, when I would wait on a school bus, they'll always be by the pond.
Yeah. But for those animals, it's important they have some quietness, especially for the nesting. I mean, they can fly around and go everywhere, but like where they nest, like at Fort Amsterdam, DV, they need to have quietness. So if people or tourists can come too close, they're going to look for other places to nest,
Gotcha.
And the same around the ponds, like the Fresh Pond and the Belair Pond or Little Bay Pond, Great Salt Pond. They need spaces and those mangroves to also distract themselves away from all our noises. Yeah. And that's what mangroves do around the pond. So we want to have that nice view over the ponds, but those birds also need their quietness and their isolation.
Protection. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, same way we would go on little peaceful staycations or vacations, right?
Yeah.
Animals need it too. Okay, cool. So with that, I'd like to thank you so much, Melanie, for coming on the program. Is there any final words you'd like to share?
Well, thanks for the invitation, of course. And what I would like to share is our slogan, which is "Nature's our future." It's also on the back of our trucks or the pickup trucks. So I think that's what we really have to focus on. Eventually, we need nature to survive ourselves and to make our island attractive for people to come. And that's our economy. So I really think it's very important that we have to focus on that. Nature's our future and not always think about, just about this year, but what about in 10 or 20 years? We still need our coral reefs, or even further, 50 years. Our children need it, they need the nature. And if I'm here maybe only 7 years and I already see the destruction, and I'm sure yourself have seen how much nicer it was in the past. So we have to make sure for our children that the nature is still there.
Definitely. And so with that, to our listeners and viewers, I hope that you guys definitely had a lot of takeaways with this conversation. And be sure to tune in again tomorrow for another interview. So do take care and see you again.